Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's make dua inshallah and we'll start. Allahumma ameen. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam. Tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma rabbana yassir wa la tu'assir wa tamam bil khair wa bika nasta'in fattah. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma rabbana innana amanna faghfir lana dhunubana wa qina 'adhaban nar. فسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, we want to continue with our topic on death and inheritance. And last we spoke about janaza and the method of the janaza, and some of the irregularities and some of those things that we should observe in janaza as well. Some of the odd things that happen in janaza, some of the things that we should observe and we sometimes neglect. Those things are, as you mentioned, very important for the benefit of the spiritual benefit of the deceased. That's why janaza is performed. It is done with the intent that the due rights of our deceased is reached, and that is that we make the dua in the janaza, which we had mentioned in the last class, that dua seeks for forgiveness of the mayit. And that janaza itself, it is the dua. It is the dua. So when one would stand with their folded hands and do that different takbirs with the du'as in between them, the thana, the darul, and the dua, we are actually doing what? Making that dua for the deceased. And the reason for the tasbih, the darul, and the dua in sequence is also that the manner that one would stand in ibadat and worship to Allah is that there will be that tasbih and praising of Allah, and there is darul in that, and there is also in that the dua. Likewise, in every dua that we make, there is also that connection that when one raises their hands in dua, that they should have that takbir or the tasbih of Allah and the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in abundance and praising Allah firstly, and then sending the root on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then making dua of all sorts of requests that one may have and for anyone that one desires for, and whatever it be. That's a natural manner and way that one should make dua, the tertib or the order of dua. And this is how we should follow in making our duas. And similarly, in the Salatul Janaza, it is done in a similar manner. With that, praising Allah, then the darur, and then the dua itself. So with these combination, one derives the benefit of the dua. All right, hence it is followed keenly, in particular, with the manner of dua. And that salat is salat, which is a dua. We mentioned about, in the last part here, the latecomers for janazah on page 604. It tells us here that when a latecomer fears that he engages himself in wudu, ablution, he will miss the janazah salah. Then only is it permissible for him to make tayammum and join the jama'ah. And that's important. That a person, he is there, water is available, but by making water, what's going to happen? He will miss the janaza salah. And janaza salah is as such, it's very what? Short. It's not long. And the takbirs come one after the next, and salams is there. There is no other posture except that qiyam, that standing position. All right? Which we had also mentioned about. That for salatul janaza, we must stand, except for some valid reason. This rule applies to the janaza salah only, that in the presence of water, that one can make what? Tayammum, based on the necessity and the importance to get quickly as possible to perform the janaza if it has already started. All right? Whomsoever arrives for the janazah salah after the imam has recited one or more takbir, and this is also important here, of the takbirs, should wait and join the imam when he says the next takbir. So there are sequences that he will make the takbir for the praising of Allah, and then for the Darul, and there's a next takbir before he starts that, and there's a takbir after the Darul, and then the takbir after the dua. He should wait for one of these, and then there's the last takbir for the salams. Alright? So he should wait for one of these takbirs and join the imam with that takbir. Okay? After this, after the imam's salam, he should complete the missed takbirs by merely saying Allahu Akbar once for every takbir that was missed. Alright, not reciting the du'as, nor the what? The Darul, or the what? Praising of Allah, if one has missed these specific du'as in the what? Salah. All he has to do is Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, as the case would be, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, or Allahu Akbar, as the case would be, in whichever of them he has missed, and complete with salams immediately. So that is the what? The importance of not delaying in this particular dua and salah. Alright? So no dua should be read. No dua should be read at this particular point in time. Only the takbir should be said. If the imam has completed the fourth takbir, then too the latecomer should join and complete all the missed takbirs before the imam says the salam. So he should try as much as if he heard the takbir, the imam will just hold on for a split before he starts giving the salam. During that time, he should raise his hand one time, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, and join with the salams as the imam makes salams. Right? That is the order of one who would join with janazah. If he comes late, he should just recite these takbirs to complete his janazah salah along with the imam in the time when he's making the salams. Alright? So with this, we would understand that Salatul Janazah, there is no delay by anyone. So we can't come and say, well, he's finished. What do I do now? Or what's next? Once the Salah starts, we should know immediately join. Once we hit Takbir, stand in line and perform that Janazah. We also dealt with the importance of having the rows, the odd number of rows, and at least 3. And we talk about 40 people in the Janazah Salah. We talk about 100 because there are different hadiths that recommends these being a form of intercession, a form of benefit to the deceased, and asking Allah's forgiveness for him. Once these people are in number, irregardless of whether it's the number of 40, 100, or 3 rows, whichever they are mentioned there, it's all dealing with the quantity, showing that the more people is present for janazah, it is a better and more rewarding and more beneficial, not only for those who are present, but for the deceased, which is more important. All right? The Shari'i method of the dafan, the burial, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So we finished janazah at that point in time. Now we cover all those aspects of janazah in detail to as much as we could do in the short time that we have, and that is mentioning all the different aspects on the Shari'i issue that is needed for janazah. And after the completion of our janazah, the next step will be burial. And that is the dafan, the burial, and how important it is now between janazah and burial. And this is important. After the mayit, the deceased, we already perform the rites of janazah. The next step is not a last view for those who never see before. All right? The next step is what? Burial. There is no delay or waiting or, for any type of thing that will come as a hindrance, except it be something that stops us, like probably the law, somebody says you can't pass here, or you can't do this, just some traffic problems or something or the other. But beside these types of hindrances, it shouldn't be that people balling and blocking up the track and you can't leave here, you can't do this. And these type of things are not tolerated by us as Muslims. Because we should understand that a deceased is something that we should respect. It is a member of our family, someone who has passed away, and therefore the due respect for our deceased should be observed. And that means, due respect means that we should not behave in a manner that we want to hold back or to keep what is duly right for the deceased. So immediately after the janazah is finished, the next procedure and process is towards the cemetery. And as much as possible, if there are some of those people who will be there, definitely they have lost someone, they will have feelings, they will be attached to some aspect of it, and they'll be connected to the relationship, and they may feel very sad, and they may want to express the sadness in ways that may not be liked. It's not beneficial to the deceased, and not beneficial to those who are around. So if the restraint needs to be done, then one must restrain such people as best as possible to avoid delay in the proceedings of taking the fund for burial. All right, the mayit burial. All right. So after the janaza salah is performed, the mayit should be buried as soon as possible. The janaza should be carried and placed at the qibla side of the grave. All right. This is where the body is placed, the mayit is placed, for now being what? Removed from there into the grave itself. All right? First step. So you reach to the point of the grave. The next, it is desirable for the mahrams or close relatives of a female mayit, so it may be one's mother, it may be one's sister, of that nature, who would have probably passed away. All right? So her mahram would be her sons, or her brothers, or her father, someone in this relationship close like that who cannot marry her, who should now attend to the personal burial needs. And the personal burial needs now directly deals with having the body placed into the grave. Having the body placed into the grave. And one out of these three people, if it's a female, should be doing this, these groups of people. All right? And in placing the body into the grave, the head should be on the right side of the grave if one faces the qibla. Right, so if you're facing the qibla direction, you have your grave line up, the head will be to the right side of the qibla. All right? And next step would be, we just line up first, we're reaching the grave yet. We just line up the position for placing the body. So we have the body facing with the head on the right if we are facing the direction of the qibla. It is desirable that the mahram or the close relative of the female mayit should enter the grave to lower the body. All right? So that individual, be the father, that person, and the husband should not enter the grave to bury his wife. All right? That's it. The husband should not enter the grave to bury his wife. Why? Because death is separation. There is no relationship by that. All right? That's where it ends. So it is not masnoon sunnah that there be an odd number. All those who enter the grave should face the qibla. All right? Whether it's one person or two person or three persons who enter the grave, to fix this, it don't have to be an odd number. Once the person who are in there, the persons who are in there, will be able to manage to lower the body properly, not causing harm to the body. In other words, don't put somebody there and they're so feeble that they can't even help themselves in there, far less to do the job of placing the body into the grave. And there shouldn't be someone at the same time who has that level of weakness or sadness and emotions that when they start, as they enter into the grave and they touch the mayit's body, they start to what? Weep and cry, and they lost the sense of purpose that they are in the grave for and what they are there to do. So, yes, there may be emotions, but they must not forget what they are entering into the grave to do, and complete that with the best of manner as possible that they can. All right? It is mustahab that to hold a sheet over the grave while lowering and burying a female. If there is fear that have kafan opening, then it is wajib to do so. In other words, when we place the body, the entire lifafa, the last sheet that wraps up the entire body, is usually wrapped on the ends, and when we're lowering the body, nothing exposes. All right? But when placing the body into the grave, into the recess, into the actual narrow area where the body is rested in our type of grave that we dig, when it goes into there, we also adjust the body and we loose out the nuts and so on, that we tie these extra pieces of thing, we strap the hands and the feet with and so on, those things are removed. At that point in time, those pieces of cloth are also loose, but in the chance that the face and so on become exposed during the movement of this with this cloth, then it is best that what happens? That a sheet is placed over it for protection for the sister. All right? And why we can prove that this is so important and necessary, that the entire body be covered, even at this point, and the security of this happens. In the battle of, when the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, his uncle died, Hamza. When his uncle Hamza died, and they were placing one sheet of cloth that they had to bury him. When they placed the sheet of cloth, it was insufficient to cover the entire body. Piece was available to only cover what? When they pulled to cover the head, the feet will become exposed. And this was Hamza radiallahu ta'ala an. And then when they will cover the feet, the head will become exposed. Then the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he gave the order that the head should be wrapped and covered with the entire part of the body, and the feet will now be covered with grass. Based on the means and the necessity that was before them, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam ordered the cloth covers his head until where it could reach, and the rest of the body, that's in the lower part of the feet, should be covered with the grass. All right? So, there is dalil and there is proof to show what the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in that we maintain this level of what? Protecting and guarding with one, our deceased, and protecting them in terms of their being covered as they ought to be covered. All right? It is mustahab. All right? Therefore, for that person, it's mustahab that the sheet be placed if there is fear, wajib, that the woman, the mayat, becomes exposed and someone would see her. All right? The mayat, the deceased. The fourth is that it is mustahab for those present to recite this dua whilst the body is being lowered into the grave. Bismillahi wa billahi wa ala millati rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All right, this is what we should recite while the body is being lowered into the grave. In the name of Allah, and on the creed and the religion and faith of that which we follow, the faith, meaning that which the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam brought, that deen of Islam. All right, it refers directly to that. So in the way of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the millet and the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the same way the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam would have buried his companions, and the companions would have buried their deceased, is following on the lines of the deen. In the similar manner, we should adopt and bury our deceased. And it was not fancy in any big way. It was done in the simplest of manner. And in that likeness, we recite this dua to place our mayat, our deceased, into the grave, into the recess. After placing the body in the recess of the grave, it is masnoon, sunnah, to turn it on its right side to face the Qibla. All right, so we are in the recess, in the grave where the actual narrow part is, where we place it into the grave. And that narrow trench, we tilt the body against one of the walls of the grave as though the person is sleeping on the right. And in that direction, leaning on that right side, the face faces towards the direction of the Qibla. And the entire body has that tilt towards the Qibla. This is what the practice is. So it is placed as though it is sleeping, and this is the direction we also sleep at night. We start off at least sleeping in the sunnah and in the way that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam would sleep. And that is, he used to turn his entire body to the right with his hand under his face in that manner, and his feet folded at the left, the right over the left. And we start off sleeping like this. And of course, we will turn later on in the night, but whatever it would be, we start off with the sunnah in this particular manner. When we place our mayat into the grave, we also place them with their body in this direction. A next important point, in the process of placing the body, the strip of cloth that are tied to the head, the chest, the leg areas and so on, should now be untied to leave no type of knots or hole in the body in any way like that inside of there anymore. There's no need for it anymore. So all this is done while the person who is in there will do all of these transactions in there. All right? Next, the recess should then be covered with unbaked bricks, meaning like if we had stone or whatever, things with bamboo or some part of timber, planks that we use, whichever of these type of wood or material that we can to cover the recess area, and they're not the entire top of the grave. We're talking about the part where the trench, recess where the body is placed. We bench it, we rest the planks across, and then now we cover. The recess, now, how it should be done? After covering and placing the timber, the cover should now be filled and shaped. It is mustahab to begin closing the recess of the trench from the leg side from the males, for males, and from the head side for the females. Alright? Mustahab. All remaining little openings should be closed with mud or grass to seal it off. The use of any fabric or blanket in any is unnecessary and wasteful. In other words, don't try and clog these holes with pieces of cloth or spread a sheet now on the plank and the board that you have to close it off. What is mentioned and recommended is to use either grass or mud and plug the holes and so on around where you cover off. Alright? All those present should participate to fill the cover, the grave, with at least 3 handfuls of soil. I know sometimes we go to the cemetery, nowadays we hire undertakers, we say, or people to deal with all of these things first. So they come, they prepare the graves, they dig it first, and they also, when we finish, we just throw 3 handfuls of dirt, and after we finish that, what do? Stand up one side and talk, and allow these people, they are paid to do that job, and so let them do their job, and we do all the talking while they what? Do the job. Alright? Now, this is not what the practice should be like. Because what we're supposed to be doing is covering the grave and filling it as best as possible and as fast as possible for our deceased or mate. Alright? And in placing this into the grave, at least the 3 handfuls, what should be mentioned? In Surah At-Taha, Surah 20, verse 55, we are told that we should say, while throwing these into the handfuls into the grave, we should recite this: Min ha khalaqnakum. In the first handful of dirt. In the second handful, we should recite wa fiha nu'idukum. Alright? And in the third handful, recite wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukhra. Alright? Meaning that minha khalaqnakum, we were created from this earth. Meaning the first person that ever was created was Adam alayhi salam, and he was created from what? Clay. Earth. Wa fiha nu'idukum. And to it we shall have to what? Return. And it is a sign for us while making this dua that we are not only just throwing dirt into the grave, but we are also telling ourselves that we are created from this, and in this we are going to go back to. We are going to return to the soil. And from this very soil, we are saying, وَمِنْهَا نُخْرِجُكُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. From this very soil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make us back into the human being that we are. In it, we learn a great lesson. And that great lesson is that we have in and within us a very important aspect of our life, is that there is a cycle for us. There is a cycle. 3 things in that cycle there. خَلَقْنَاكُمْ نُعِيدُكُمْ وَنُخْرِجُكُمْ. Allah created us from it. Allah will return us to it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take us out from it. And it tells us the whole cycle of one transitory stage to the next of a human being's life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that even in the Quran. He mentions us again after Surah Taha. He says again, لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Inshiqaq, verse 19, He says, لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who makes us go through different what? Stages in our life. From one stage to the next stage. لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. From one stage to the next stage. And we must know that that grave is a stage. لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. But what do we look at in life? When a child comes into this world and he grows up and he reaches the age of teenager, do you think that that child will behave like a baby again and cry and want milk and bottles and wants all the different things that a baby will want to play with toys? Come a teenager? No. He now looking to what? A different stage, what teenagers like, what they want to be like. He leaves out that stage of baby and goes into what? Teenage. And when he reaches the age with adulthood, he understands life seriously now. He starts to think about what? Children, family, car, house, property. He leaves out what? What is called the youthful, springful life. You could do anything at that time. But when you see life get a little more serious, you start to think differently. He lives out a new stage. And when he reaches an old age stage, if he gets to that stage, he gets to realize now he can't do anything again. And all the things he used to work upon before and all the things he achieved in life, he now goes into a stage where he actually falls to what? Close to death. And Allah says He takes him from stage to stage in this life, but it falls in a cycle. Minha khalaqnakum fiha nu'idukum. To that grave, you're going back right there. Allah created you from something. You go through all these stages, but you're going back right where you start. Where Allah wants us to return. And returning to that cycle, it is that waiting room. It is a waiting room. You know, it's like leaving this world, everything now. Now the qabr and the grave is here. The grave has now reached upon us. لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا. This stage, no living human being will never, ever be able to understand what goes on in there. Only you who have crossed this stage. You enter this stage, no one will ever even hear one sound of what punishment or what you're receiving or what goodness you're receiving. They cannot even enjoy, even understand one of it. Nothing of it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us into that new world. And that new world is such a world that it's a new stage in life. And a life that is after death. What happens there? And this is what we have to understand in the grave. Because we have left everything, janazah, everything is done for us. And now we have reached into our new world, our new stage. No one is there now because they'd already what? Filled up the grave for us. They cover it up. They make my new abode, whether it is 6 feet deep and with a little recess 2 feet wide or as narrow as it can be, and they cover me there. This is it. No lights, no water, no food, no cup, no plate, nothing, no food of this world, no source of wealth, no source of benefit, no minerals, no wealth, nothing from this world is there in that grave for that deceased. We don't take food to the deceased. We don't carry anything for the deceased. We don't do anything material and say, well, look, you go to them and say, well, today I take your money and I buy this car, or I buy this new property, or I invest and I make 10 million more on your property. And we don't say these things to them. We don't go and tell them, well, your business is going better today. Know that you're going. We don't even say this. Because at the time we leave, some special things also happen to those who bury the dead. Allah caused that we forget all that feelings after some time. Immediately, you walk out from the grave, you also forget everything about that. It'll linger on for a few days, a few months, but it dwindles away. It goes away and fades away. It may have a little remembrance if something come up or some occasion happen or this happens, you get back a feeling. But other than that, every day is not the same feeling. It fades away. It fades away. And that home that we have, that qabr, now becomes what? A home that is only for who? Me. No one else. No one else surrounds me at this point in time, except those who are also the dwellers of the grave. Those who dwell around us at that point in time is also important, because we must know who our neighbors are. And who do we want to be our neighbors with us in our qabr and around where we are going to be buried. And this is an important fact as well, that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has also given in significant hadith that tells us as well that it is best to be buried where a person who would prefer to bury where the best of all qabr and grave that one would desire to die and bury is where? Jannatul Baqi. They would wish that they would go to Hajj or they will go to Medina and they will what? Die, and they will die there and bury there. Because their companions and their people who they will be next to are people who are righteous, people who are blessed, and you're in the land and in the environment close to that of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The best of place for burial, the best of abode and home for the deceased and the mayit will be there. That is for those who have that understanding that where they really want to go when they die. You know, we think about this place, which area we want to live in, where is an uptown area, a gated community. We want this in our community. I want this house in this particular area because, you know, this is a nice area. Now I don't want to live in that hot area, that real crime there, and all these different things you think about in this life. But when we die, we say where he fit, he good right there. But it's not so. It's also important that where the mayat lies is also important. We should secure a good area, a good spot, a good place for that person who will be dwelling in that grave. And that's why the best choice would have been first class, Jannatul Baqi. Can't get Jannatul Baqi? Then we come to our own what? Land, and then we look for the best spot to bury. And that's why, as Muslims, it is also important that we also secure the places that we take and bury our deceased. If there are public cemeteries, we should also ensure that who are buried where, and we should also have our allotment or plot dedicated only to our Muslim brothers and sisters. And it should not have any other person, not that we are discriminating, but what we are saying is that it is from our beliefs and from the advice of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we should have such an environment that is best for the believers. Best for the believers. And if we want the best for ourselves and for our believing brothers and sisters who leave this world, and we want to give them the best, even in the state when they would leave, and they want to take care of them and bury them, at least bury them in some spot that is beneficial to them. That they don't have to listen to the sounds of the cries of the grave. That they'll be in the environment that is close and closest as possible to where they can have that comfort and blessed environment at least. No, that's, we'll have the masjid as being a place for us to be in a comfortable environment of piety and blessing, and any action is done there, it is rewarding. A person who dies, the best of the requests for him is to have the best qabr, the best grave. Give them the best, and that is to place them in a place in such an environment. Hence, it's always advisable for us as Muslims that we find such a place for our communities, that we take care of our deceased in this manner, that they will be benefiting in that way that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has advised us in the hadith, that we go to the best place first. And if we cannot have the best, at least in our communities, we try to establish the best for our deceased. And looking at that, the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam also tells us, you know, when we travel in this world, always look at لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ, that you live in this world, but no, كُنْ فِي الدُّنْيَا كَأَنَّكَ غَرِيبٌ أَوْ عَابِرُ السَّبِيلِ, that you are living in this world as though you are a traveler. And you are living here a stranger, a traveler, who are here for a very short time. لَتَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ, very short. And in this short time, what should be done? What can be done? And what are we doing? For where and for what? And that's why every day in our life, we should know that this stage that we are going down to is that place called the grave, our abode. Minha khalaqnakum, minha nu'idukum, wa minha nukhrijukum taratan ukra. And we should always have this in our mind, what that grave is going to be like to me. And when we lie down in our beds, we should also think about it. Think about what my position will be when I am alone and I'm lying in this grave. It's not to scare ourselves. It's not to put that scare that that we don't have life to live and we can't enjoy life. But there is a limitation to where we put our enjoyment and in what direction our enjoyment goes as well. And the things that we need to do that will benefit us whilst we are alive for that position that when we die, what will be our condition. All right? So that is also mentioned by the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Live with such condition that you're not going to make everything here in this world as it is everlasting for you. But like a traveler, like such an individual, that your abode is not here. Your abode is not this world. Our abode is where? Al-Qabr, the grave, the final destination in this world. That is the final destination and stage in this world. You can travel anywhere you want. You can go and live in the moon, wherever you want to go and live. Whichever part of the place you want to go and live, whichever part of this world you want to live, you can live. But you must know that death is going to come. And the final abode will be there. It will be there. That one will have to bury and remain there. And death will come and that will be our abode all by ourselves. All right? Now, some of the actions that one must recognize that is disliked even whilst at the grave. So we did our burial. It is makruh to add more soil to the qabr, the grave, than that which is dug out from it. All right? We maintain whatever we have when we dug out of the grave. We take that and fill it back into that spot. Obviously, when we dig the recess, we'll have excess dirt because that part of the recess is covered by board, and whatever excess is there, we'll have it as additional dirt. Right? The shape of the qabr when filled should be like a hump of a camel. The height should be approximately 25 to 30 centimeters in height. All right? That's the height it should really be. It should not be made square or into any other types of shapes. Or circle or whatever you want, but the shape of the entire body, what its trench is dug like, that is the shape we should maintain. Those square it up in a different direction or widen it from what it actually trenched or digged in that direction. So if you dig, it's 4 feet of whatever the width is, and you go down to 6 feet or whatever the length you're going with, and then the depth, whatever it should be, that should be the way we maintain the shape. All right? Then all types of buildings and enclosures on or around the qabr, the grave, are not permissible. And we're talking about building tombs, blocking it and sealing it off, and these types of things, or building a house, roof over it, or whatever it is, or a shed over it. None of these things will be permissible. All right? Building on the qabr has been emphatically denounced in the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He told us clearly that these are the things that we should not do. If one wants to demark a spot, or to know where someone has been buried, a relative, and you know it's a relatively large place for a burial ground, and we still want to recognize this, we can use some other means of markation, be it a small piece of metal or something we can use to mark the spots or whatever it may be, or something like that. But we don't make heads and these things and mark in memory of and in late of this and that and those things. We don't do all of these type of things at our grave, or place any types of Quranic material, ayats of Quran on the bed of the grave, or write it in all these different markations and so on the grave. All right? It is mustahab to sprinkle water on the grave from the head to the legs side 3 times after the qabr has been shaped. To recite the Quran and make dua for the deceased at his grave side after the grave has filled and shaped is also mustahab, that one should recite Quran, Baqarah, and the beginning part of Surah Baqarah, and also the ending part, and also make dua for the deceased. All right? Now, whilst at that point in time, whilst the burial is taking place and all of these things is going on, the dirt is being filled into the grave, usually what should the people who accompany the mayat, the deceased to the grave. What should they be doing standing there at the grave during all of that time? What is the best practice? What used to be done? It's important that we do not carry on conversations while this is being done, while the grave is being filled. It is best to be engaged in dhikr, in some sort of tilawat of Quran, some dua, some type of thing that will be maintaining that level of spirituality, that level of connection and purpose of being there. Because this is the second aspect of the grave that we told that if we do it, we'll get second qirat, benefit and reward for the burial. All right? And also whilst we are at that, while a person will go for janazah and going for janazah salah, and he wants to leave in the first half of it. In other words, he just come to the janazah, he don't want to go to the burial. This is the case nowadays at times. That person just come and do janazah, well, at least I fulfill the right. It is also not like that a person should leave just after janazah and go his way and not go and fulfill the rites of burial. He should be there to fulfill also the rites of burial. But if he cannot stay, then he must also go to the bereaved family and at least get their permission in such a way that you show them your condolences and you also show them your urgency to leave and you ask their excuse and you leave. Because that is also part of the adab and the etiquettes that should be observed for and the rights of the living with the relationship to the deceased. We should let them know that we were here and we fulfill that basic necessity of letting them know. But I won't be able to make it to the grave, but at least, accept my condolences and may Allah take care of you and show you patience and so on. Or whatever we can mention to them to give them words of advice and continuation, we should do that if we're not even going to the grave. All right? And even after the grave, we should also go back to the home at least and share our graves. So if they know we're not able to come back after the grave, at least let them know this, and then we can leave from by the grave itself. All right? It has been related by Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an, that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried the dead. He paused and said, "Beseech forgiveness from Allah for your brother and make dua for his steadfastness because he is going to be questioned by Munkir and Nakir." And that's why we are making intercession even at the grave that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are leaving here. We are leaving the grave, but we don't know what is going to happen to this individual in that grave. We are leaving the grave, but what is happening there is much more intense than we can even imagine. It is like a person waiting to write an exam after studying all of his life. After studying all of his life. And such answers for that exam cannot be brought up from references and notes. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam also mentions that the answers to the questions that will be asked was already rehearsed by that individual and is already known. And it will be said, we cannot make up our next answer. The answers will already be automatic to us. All right? It has been related by Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala that after the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried the dead, he paused and said, "Beseech forgiveness from Allah for your brother and make dua for his steadfastness because he is going to be questioned now by Munkir and Nakir." And after the burial, the first ruku of Surah Al-Baqarah should be read at the head side and of the qabr, and the last ruku of Surah Al-Baqarah should be read at the leg side of the deceased in his grave, his qabr. All right? Ta'ziyat and condolence to the bereaved family. This is the next aspect of it. So we finish what should be done at the grave with the dua. Now the condolences to the family, to sympathize with the bereaved family as is part of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after the janazah is done. It is part from our teachings as well. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that one should console and comfort the Muslim who is in distress. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "He who consoles the one who is distressed shall be rewarded as much as the bereaved is rewarded." And one should take note of these few points. One should be most humble at this point in time at the burial and even on the janazah. A sign of this is humility. Many times people go there and they're in a different mood, as though they're attending janaza, but it's like, well, now I'm alive, I'm good, I'm healthy, and this and that. But really and truly, we should be humbled by death. We should be humbled by death because it's a sign for us. As big as we are, as strong as we are, and whatever we are, that is my fate. That is my destination as well. We should be humbled by it. Express his grief. Speak less about worldly affairs at that time. And should not joke or laugh when we are there. Mention the good acts and deeds of the deceased and abstain from ill ones. Very important. That we should stay away from mentioning ill deeds of the deceased. Why? Once the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was passing by this grave, and his companions were accompanying him. They started to talk about this person, he did this particular act, and he came to the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he asked to be stoned. And when he was stoned and he died, they mentioned that this filthy person, the janazah was done for him and so on, and they mentioned like this. Then the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he passed by a deceased animal, a donkey, and it was swollen and his legs were outstretched. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to them, eat of the flesh of this animal. Because what you have done, they said, why should we eat from this deceased animal? It is, it's rotten. Why should we eat from it? He says, the act that you have done at the grave of your brother is worse than eating from the meat of this deceased animal. Than eating the meat of this deceased animal. At all times, the rights of that deceased must also be maintained. The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam has said, mention the good actions of your deceased and abstain from the offensive ones. The time of the ta'ziyat extends for 3 days after the death. It is makruh for the ta'ziyat and the respect and the condolences after this period, except in cases where one is not present at the janazah or when the bereaved is absent. Then the respect that is due for that person, the ta'ziyat, before the burial is still permissible. In other words, you're probably out of town. You should still go back, but don't go to someone's house continuously and become a burden to them. Because they already have stress. They already have difficulties. They also go through a difficult time, but now you want to go every day and, not that you're going to go there and think, but if you're staying there for like hours and hours and, keeping your company, you're sad. No. We should know the level of what we should maintain in a relationship. If you had to call someone or let them know that we care, these different things. But don't become what? You go, well, we have to eat, then you start with something else, and then, we don't go to that extent. All right? That take care of the what? Rights that is duly deserving for the deceased. All right? Inshallah, when we continue next class, we'll continue on a few important points about the grave itself and visiting the grave and some of the basic things on the grave. And then we'll move on to our major topic after, which is inheritance itself. What is done after that, inshallah. Let us make dua, inshallah. Allahumma ameen. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم ربنا إننا آمنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين